This is A Silent War Within, the podcast dedicated to confronting the unseen mental health battles carried by our first responder and healthcare heroes. This show is about real stories, real struggles, and real ways to survive the storm and come out stronger on the other side. For too long, stigma has kept you silent, but this is your space to bravely break that silence, share vital insights, and build a community where your well-being truly comes first, because your service deserves unwavering support.
Welcome to A Silent War Within. This is our inaugural episode. It's all about who we are, what we've done, and most importantly, why this podcast exists. We want all of you to understand the backgrounds that shape our perspective on mental health in the public and healthcare service fields. It's been quite a journey to get to this point. Tim, you're my co-host. We've been friends for coming close to 10 years, at least, I think, a long time. We've been through some trials of life together. We've been in what we like to refer to as the pits of hell together, and been through some fires for sure. So one of the things that I want out of this podcast is for us to be authentic and genuine. What are some of the things that you hope to give to others by doing this podcast?
A lot of my motivation, Kevin, for this podcast came from my own struggles with mental health and never really finding a place that felt just right for me. I tried counseling several times and it always didn't feel genuine and real. And so I would not go back. And I know that one thing that's always helped me the most with my mental health and also processing grief and stress of our job is talking to my coworkers, you included in that. And so for me, I want all of our listeners to have a place where they feel safe and heard, because sometimes those places are hard to find.
We know a lot of each other's stories, but I'll share mine first and then I'll throw it back to you and you can share a little bit about yours. You know, I was the kid at the parade every year, the Christmas parade or the 4th of July parades that we would have in my hometown, that would see the ambulances and the fire trucks coming down the road and always say, I wanted to do that. I wanted to drive an ambulance. And then it turned out I wanted to help people. And of course, there was always that draw of lights and sirens and going really fast and people getting out of your way and things like that, that was kind of just drew me in. It really gravitated me to it. So I always like to say that this profession kind of picked me from a very young age. I think that as I started to enter that world at 18 and I became a firefighter first, I went to fire academy, did all those things, and stayed with that for probably 2 years. It was in a house fire that I realized that it was too hot and I was entirely too fat to do that job. They told me that I was going to, we were going to put on our SCBAs and we were going to run into this house. And my first thought was, well, why? There's nobody in it. The pets are even out. Like, I realized the fire service is also about saving property. I was not felt very led by the spirit to run into the burning house with my SCBA on. And my chief said, well, we're going to practice. And I said, I don't want a roof to collapse on me because of practice. Soon after that, I was assigned strictly to the rescue truck. So I did Jaws of Life and have been in many cars with individuals that we were having to cut out and things like that. So that part of it was more for me gratifying than anything else. And then I had friends in college that were telling me, you need to go be an EMT. You need to go be an EMT. Well, it was something that I kind of had a secret fear of. Like, that's what I always wanted to do, but I didn't know if I was physically capable and mentally capable of going through the school and going through the clinicals. I was young and single, so I really didn't have anything to lose. So I jumped in an EMT class, and now after 2 decades of being in this career, it was one of the best decisions I ever made. But through the 7 years I was an EMT, went to paramedic school, became a paramedic. Now I've been a paramedic for over 10 years. I have really noticed throughout the past probably 10 years as a paramedic, more so than an EMT, I think there's a level of responsibility that comes with being a paramedic that is just even a heavier weight on top of the things we see and the things that we witness. And we kind of have a front row seat to everybody's worst day. I can bring out numerous calls that affected me, and I started to realize it probably about 10 years ago, but I didn't do anything about it. There was one particular call where I was an EMT. We pulled a couple kids' bodies out of this still half engulfed house. It just wrecked me for a little while, to the point where I had changed the person I was. And I say that, and you'll hear me say that throughout the course of this show, that the things we see changes really who we are on the inside. It changes, I believe, our chemical makeup. And thankfully we've got, you know, therapists and scientists and doctors that will attest to those scheduled for upcoming episodes. So we're really excited to see where that goes and get to learn a little bit more about how the brain functions. But what I eventually realized is I was living in a fight or flight mode. I was living in that constant danger, or perception of danger rather, that really kept me on edge all the time. And people started to see it in the way that I would react to situations, the way that I was treating my family and my friends. They saw it. So I had a particular friend, his name's Michael, probably one of my favorite partners, maybe of all time. His name's Michael Kennedy. Shout out, Michael. He came to me after this call and he said, dude, you have changed. You need to go see a doctor. We came up in a time when it was suck it up, you know, live with it. You press on to the next call. So I kind of had that mentality that it was a suck it up and deal with it situation. I was going to have to put my big boy panties on and keep running calls and keep living in the world and keep being all the hats that I had to wear. I had to keep still being the husband by that time. I had to keep being, you know, the friend and the brother and eventually the father. But in that time, I kind of took his advice after he kind of had to hound me a few different times about it. And I went and I got on medication. And once the medication started to work and I started to feel better, I did what most medication takers do. I said, I don't need this anymore. I feel great. And so I got off the medication and lived 5 or 6 years there where I wasn't in fight or flight mode anymore. I had kind of conquered those and lived with that and sat with that emotion enough that I was kind of past that. I could still close my eyes and see those kids' faces and relive that emotional toll that had on me. I could still live in that. And if you hear a little roaring, we figured out that Kim's mic is picking up her husband cutting grass. He must have come close to the house because I just heard it and it threw me off. That's funny. We've worked with Kim and her husband. So Kim and I work at the same company, and we've worked with Kim and her husband for so long that has a comical effect to me because I can just see TJ out there mowing grass.
Go Dad.
Go Dad. Yeah, we call him Dad, Mom. So in that, living in that emotional toll, it was probably 2021, and I had not done anything for the last 6-7 years for my mental health. And there was an incident where my wife and I had one of those silly fights. And for whatever reason, I got so triggered by this that all of the emotions that I had kept pent up and hidden away came to the surface. And when they did, they came out as rage. They came out as anger. They came out as frustration, and not directed toward her, just a physical outflowing of rage. I was literally outside and I was just hitting my shed so hard. We have a big metal building that's kind of like a garage. It's got an attached carport, and I'm just hitting this thing, and the marks are still there today. I can still walk outside, and I know that's where my mental health journey truly started. That's where it all began. What kind of really led to this is in 2017, I worked one of the worst calls of my career. It has stuck with me to this day. I'm actually presenting this topic about how we deal with the traumatic things we see at the Mississippi EMS conference this year. So if you want to see us, Kim and I both will be presenting. So come see us at the Mississippi EMS conference. We'll be more than happy to meet you, see you, talk to you. We don't have a booth or anything. We've got our company booth that we'll be working at different times, but Silent War Within does not have a booth, but we'll be there speaking, and that will be a part of our resume, part of the things you hear from us. But I'm speaking particularly on this call that happened in 2017 and what it did to me personally. Well, let me tell you, it was a kid that had drowned. At base level, we all hate pediatrics. We all hate to see anything bad happen to a kid. But this call really caught me off guard because in the midst of getting dispatched, I get dispatched for a person down, which is generic complaint. Everybody where I used to work, I think, was a person down or unresponsive. About 3 minutes from this scene, in what was a 25-minute response out in the middle of nowhere, as it goes, I come to find that the firemen are trying to reach me on the radio. When I pick up the radio, they say, do you want us to bring this kid to the truck when you get here? Now, backstory to this, I was always the prepared paramedic, especially not having done this as long as I would have liked to be comfortable with that kind of thing. So I would have the tape on my leg with all my pediatric drug dosages already wrote out, what the prime weight for this patient was and what, I was going to do for them. I had my whole plan in mind. So I didn't have time to plan. That threw me off. Well, of course, when I drive up, they bring this limp blue kid to me that they've been doing CPR on for the 25 minutes that they were waiting on me to get there. Put him on the stretcher, do all the things, head out to the hospital. Could I probably have logically pronounced him then? Yes, but I didn't have it in me to do that because I wanted to give the parents every opportunity to see me work, to see that I had done everything in my power for their child. And so I get him on there, get him intubated, get the IVs going, start pushing medications, got a firefighter riding with me doing compressions. This was before actual compression devices. We actually had to do them with our hands.
Old people.
So we're doing all the things and we're going to a hospital that's probably 15 minutes away from the scene. And we get there, or we get close to there, and I look on the monitor and I start seeing a QRS complex in between the compressions. And I told the firefighter, I said, whoa, stop. I need to check this. I checked it. Kid had a pulse. All right. We were in a great place emotionally because for that second we had gotten something back. There's a chance, you're saying there's a chance. Yes. And so I had time to call the receiving facility and tell them, hey, I got a pulse back. That's all I had time to say. Well, by the time we pulled around the corner, maybe a minute later, there was a whole team of people waiting outside on, we're going to call it the tarmac, but waiting on that tarmac area for me as we pulled up. And when I pulled up, they scoop the kid up, they take my stretcher, I go with them, all the things start happening. Well, when the parents get there, they praise me as this hero. I've saved their child. I felt like anything but a hero. There was nothing heroic about what I had done, because to me, I had failed at everything I had done. I had misdosed the medication because I wasn't prepared. I had just juggled this call. It took me years to be able to look back at that and say that we did everything right. We got a pulse back. It just had a negative outcome. And unfortunately, I got so drawn into that. I visited the family. I brought them gift baskets every day. I was contacting medical staff every day, getting follow-ups. This kid eventually passed away, unfortunately, and the parents allowed organ donation folks to come in and take his organs. And through some backdoor channels, I found out that a few kids actually lived through him in his donation of his organs. So that was one of the ones that sticks with me. That's one of the ones I can close my eyes and think about it, and I can see that whole scene replay. And I know that other people have worse calls than that, there's people strewn all over the place and body parts and all these things. But to me, that was my kryptonite. I don't know why. It was likely because I had a daughter that was the exact same age as this patient, and I rationalized that child into my own. So I had to go out in the ambulance bay after that and take a good long cry and get on the phone, and I talked to my daughter just to make sure she was okay. It affected my mental health so much. So fast forward to that 2021 incident, all that I had kind of repressed down because I never did anything with that. I mean, I talked to my wife, talked to some of my friends, but never really did anything to open up about the way it made me feel. I just talked about the call specifics, and that emotional toll and all that I had held in for so long finally come to a surface. And I'm sitting here just aggressively and violently striking my shed. And so much so that we had just had a baby the year before, and my wife takes my child and gets in the car and locks the doors because she is scared of what I might do. And after I calmed down, I had to go sit on my back porch for a while, and they stayed in the car. They wound up actually leaving because they thought I was dangerous. And after sitting there, and of course they came back after she talked to me on the telephone, but after sitting there for what felt like an eternity, I realized I am not okay. And I don't know what to do about it. So sitting on the back porch, I called the first trauma counselor that I could find in the area. And I got in with her and started talking to her. And it was a really good experience because by that time I was working where I work now, and there was nobody that knew about that call. The other part of that call that really led me into my job in pediatrics now, because Kim and I both work on a very large pediatric critical care transport team that also does neonates. And one of the things that really just set my career into motion as it is now was that call, because during that call, they had called this particular critical care team that was housed there at that time to come around the corner and to help. And they walked in and they operated with the level of confidence that I just didn't have. They operated with such an expertise. I'd never seen anything like it, because, EMS folks, we see kids and we kind of get a little shaky if we're honest with ourselves. We don't like them. Most providers will tell you that that's their least favorite call is pediatrics. So it really not only started my mental health journey, but started my professional journey in pediatrics. So that's kind of what led me to the mental health journey. And since then, I've gone to extensive training on mental health. I've gone to seminars, I've gone to trainings, I've gone to peer supports, I've gone to all these things, and kind of have become the peer support for all you guys here at where Kim and I both work. So
He does a great job at it.
that was kind of my turning point. Kim, tell us about some of your stories. Tell us about how you got into the field of medicine, how you have really shaped your mental health journey, your professional journey. Just tell us about you.
For those that don't know me, I think I had a natural affinity towards the healthcare field. My dad was a welder, and so he would always come home with different burns and blisters when I was younger. And of course, he would approach me with those and try to freak me out, as most dads do to their daughters. And I was like, man, this is cool, because he would have blood blisters, different blisters, and it's like, you want to pop it? And of course, young me, instead of shying away from it, I was like, sure. And so I was always one of those people that always wanted to help. And then just the natural draw towards science and the human body. I think it was just born into me. But my original plan was to be an OBGYN. I love childbirth. I think it's one of the most beautiful things on the planet. And of course, I became a teen mom, so that changed the trajectory of my life path for the good. I eventually decided on respiratory therapy, and I went back to college when I was 27. I had my kids first, and I had a really natural draw towards the burn and trauma. Of course, when we were doing our clinical rotations, I found that to be the most exciting. You never knew what to expect, and it was wild there. Like, it was like being in the jungle, I guess. You walk out and something else pops out at you. You never knew what was going to happen. And so right out of school, I got a job at the Level 1 Regional Trauma Center here in Memphis, Tennessee, and it was great. I did that for the first year and a half or so, and boy, oh boy, did I learn a lot, personally, professionally. But I also saw a lot of things that started to hurt, and I started to recognize that this wasn't all always fun. Like, of course, you'd have good outcomes, but then there was days, and it started to really resonate with me when it came to the police and fire service. We would see a lot of our own family, so we call it our brotherhood between fire, police, and healthcare EMS. And a lot of those patients, one in particular, resonated with me, was a officer that was shot, a female officer that was shot in 2012, who was also a mother. And I still remember seeing her stretch marks when we were working on her. And it was close to Christmas time, and the first thing I thought is, we have to save her. Somebody's not going to have their mom tonight if we don't. And I couldn't imagine my kids having to hear the same about me. And so that call still sits really heavy with me. Her partner was there with her and screaming her name and telling her to wake up, wake up, wake up. And we did lose that patient, unfortunately. And it wasn't long after that, there was actually an opportunity to move over to neonatal intensive care. My boss said, hey, Kim, there's an opening working with the babies, and I think you'd be really good at it. Well, I didn't want to. I was a mom. I didn't think that I would be able to tolerate taking care of babies. I thought it'd pull on the heartstrings a little too much and hit too close to home. And so she said, why don't you just give it a chance? And I rolled my eyes so hard underneath my eyelids because I really didn't want to, but I thought about it and I said, you know what, I'll give it a chance. So I made a deal and I said, okay, I'm going to give it a chance. But if I don't like it, can I please go back to working trauma and burn, because I do really have a passion for that. And she agreed. So that's where my journey into pediatrics began. It didn't take but a week of working there, and I decided I love it. I had so much empathy and compassion, and no, I wasn't the OB/GYN that I wanted to be, but I got to attend deliveries and I got to see births and new moms and the whole family dynamic and beautiful babies. So I was happy there, and I spent 7 years there and also got hired at our other hospital in town to further my experience into pediatrics, and I wanted to grow and be the best provider that I could be. And during that time, I started to recognize that I wasn't the same. I seemed to feel a profound sense of deep sadness, because one thing that's great about our hospital system here is they believe in continuity of care. For It's great for the patients, it's great for the families, because they become familiar with you, you're familiar with the patient, you know what they like, what they respond to, what they don't, and you can be a really good advocate for those patients. And so with that being said, if you're a person that works a lot of overtime, which I was, you could spend 4 or 5 days a week taking care of the same patient. And if it's a NICU patient that was born extremely preterm, depending on complications in the course of their hospital stay, you could take care of the same patient for almost a year. And what I found to be happening, I kind of went through a really hard time. In NICU, I had several patients who I took care of for months end up getting sick, very sick, to the point where the parents were left to make a decision of, let's make your baby a DNR or withdrawal care. And I don't know how much everybody, our listeners, know about respiratory therapy, but we do more than give breathing treatments. It's kind of a gift we have to establish an airway and put you on life support, but also we are the ones that withdraw the tube and take that away at the end of life. And so I had multiple instances within 1 week where I withdrew care 3 or 4 times within a 1 week period. And if you have never heard the scream of a mother who lost their child, it will give you goosebumps and you will feel it in your bones and your soul. And if you've never heard that, God bless you. I'm very happy that you have never had to endure that. But
That's right.
it was the road to my PTSD that I never realized I was walking after that. So I know that week, the last time that I had withdrawn care, I remember just putting my head down and walking to the bathroom, and I sunk down into the floor and I started sobbing uncontrollably. And of course, I didn't want to say anything to anybody else because I never saw anybody else show emotion like with my coworkers. So I assumed, like, I started to think and get in my own head that I was weak and what is wrong with me? I never seen anybody else cry, and why is all of a sudden this bothering me? But like you said, we were raised in the era of healthcare and EMS where mental health wasn't addressed. We didn't talk about it. We didn't show emotions. It wasn't common. And I think we all have a very deep level of repression from these traumatic events. And I think a lot of us also feared repercussion of saying anything. Would they deem us too unfit to do our job? And I know, and you know, the level of trauma both of us have incurred. We both show up every day and give 100% to our patients, and we love them, and we have care, and we have compassion, and we care for the families. Like, we care for those kids and our patients like they're our own family. And I know so many more of us that do the exact same thing, but we do go home and break down and hiding. And a lot of my motivation towards this podcast, I'll get further into it. Ultimately, what ended up happening I started having repetitive dreams of hearing the mother scream, and it would wake me up in the middle of the night. I would have anxiety. And I didn't know what to do because I loved my job. I did not like the effects that it was taking on me. And so that's what made my transition over to transport. I love to use my skill set. I loved variety. I loved excitement. I loved critical, non critical. I just love kids in general. It's always been an area I've been able to maintain love and compassion in my heart no matter what, because kids are innocent. Most of the time, the things that happen to them, they never had a choice, never asked for. And, we're adults, and a lot of us make relatively stupid decisions sometimes, so it's
Yeah.
self-inflicted sometimes.
Yep.
So sometimes it is hard to, if we're being honest with one another, it's hard to be compassionate towards somebody that, makes poor decisions and alters other people's lives, hence murder and other things. But with kids, it's a whole different ballpark. So I went and made a transition to transport in 2016. It's one of the best things I could ever do. It made me grow as a provider. I love the configuration of our team. We work nurse, paramedic, RT, and we actually cross train to each other's positions. So it's a
We do.
huge, huge, huge area of growth professionally, personally. It really challenges you and your critical thinking skills. And one of the benefits to that is we don't have to see the same patient every single day over and over. We do see a lot of bad things. And that's one of the questions that a lot of people, when you are a healthcare provider and they know, well, what's the worst thing you've ever seen?
Oh, I hate
You
that.
want to
I hate
You
that.
want to? I do too. And I know they don't mean anything by it, but it's such a triggering statement. I'm like, okay, let's dig up my backpack of trauma and I'll start pulling it out. Do you really want to go there? And it's horrible. It's horrible, the things that we've seen. And no, most of the time we really don't want to talk about it. But
Right.
that was one of the best things that could have happened, for my mental health. But then, of course, we went through a pandemic. My mom passed away
Well,
March 27th of 2020, right when we went into lockdown. So everybody was isolated, and that is not the time when you lose a parent. It's not a great time to lose a parent ever, but losing a parent during a
uh,
pandemic when you're socially distancing, to not have support of your peers, of your friends, everybody's scared of each other, we're not going to each other's house, so
yeah. Don't breathe on
That's
me.
another.
Yeah.
Don't breathe on me. Put your mask on. Wash your hands. I didn't
Yeah.
really have a lot of support through that, and I took up other hobbies, and in my mind, I was fine because that's what I've told myself for so long. I've got to be the queen of repression. And so we go through the pandemic. We went through management changes, a lot of turnovers during COVID. I don't know if it was just a compounded
It was
thing of mental
everything.
health prior to that, and
It
that
was
was the
everything.
last straw. Yeah, it was everything. So it was a hard time for a lot of us. Some of
It
us
was.
braved it out and stayed, and some of us might have been wise and left the field. We're like, I'm out, dog. I
Yeah, but
can't do this
really,
anymore.
I mean, but really, that's a, if you look at fire, EMS, police, that's a real common thread. The management changes, the differencing in policy, you know, the just even down to having a different partner every single shift, that can greatly affect our mental health. And we're told to repress it. But those are things that, we can sit here and compare traumatic calls for the next 6, 7 hours. I mean, we've got a storybook full of them. Each of us do. If you've worked in this for any amount of time, but we also have to take into account that there's some moral injury that goes along with all these traumatic things we're seeing. Yes, you're seeing traumatic things every day. Yes, you have a front row seat to everybody's worst day. Yes, the things we see are what nightmares are made of. But also that all those management changes, all those policy changes, all those different partners, all those different trucks or truck breakdowns, or for the police side, the car breakdowns, the people that are ugly to you, the defund the police, all those little things just chip away at your mental health. And that's what we're here to talk about. So this is a really good transition point. So we've talked about your story, we've talked about my story, and This is just like the highlight reel. Like I said, there are so many stories that we're going to delve into and get deep with and talk about family trauma and talk about childhood trauma and talk about all the things that really make us who we are at our core. And you'll learn us probably better than we know ourselves, hopefully, by the time this thing is over with. And I don't see an end date, but certainly all good things come to an end eventually. But this is something we want to carry on for a long, long time. But Kim, can you kind of elaborate on how we came to this realization that our stories are different? We come to the realization from different sides of the spectrum in healthcare, but how did we get together and say, let's do a podcast?
So, what ended up happening, back to the story of during COVID, Kevin actually started to be a really good advocate for our team for mental health. And he had reached out somewhere during that time frame and said, "Hey Kim, you want to help me out with a mental health?" And my first response to Kevin was no. And I think it surprised him because usually I was always involved in work things and was always a huge supporter of anything Kevin wanted to do, because of course I always want to see my coworkers be the best people they can be. And when other people are excited, I'm excited. And what I really wanted to say to Kevin was, look, if you're going to have something for mental health, sign me up, homie, because I am unwell over here. But I didn't, because I thought I could get through it on my own. I had started antidepressants, which weren't helping. I thought I was experiencing maybe some clinical depression, anxiety. I didn't realize it was PTSD. So I kept going through life, chugging along, thinking I was going to be okay. And about a month and a half ago, we had a very, very, very traumatic child abuse case. I was here with my team, and in 14 years, I would say it was the worst thing I ever saw and experienced, and it just hit me like a load of bricks. Normally, when I have a bad day, I can come home and I can drink some coffee and have a bath, go to the gym, decompress, and the next day I bounce back. I might think about it a little bit, but I can kind of keep it held off. And it was not happening. On day 3 of consecutive panic attacks, I finally text Kevin when I was at the gym. I had been out in my yard beating the shit out of a punching bag. I've been to the gym, throwing around sandbags in public, being a fool, but something had to give. And I finally texted Kevin and I said, hey, we had that conversation about mental health. I need some resources because I don't feel like myself. I don't know what's going on. I can't shake this call. I'm very anxious. I keep crying every time I try to talk about it with another coworker. I can't express anything that's on my mind. I completely lose my breath. And he said, hey, Kim, that's a classic sign of PTSD, right? What? No, I didn't. I did not know. I did not know that it was. And, over this time of us talking in the last few months and looking back, I exhibited a lot of signs of PTSD, but because nobody talks about it or it's not commonly talked about, I just thought I had a good old strong case of clinical depression. Every time I go to the doctor, I would score severe, and I'm like, that's weird. I seem generally happy. I'm a kind of funny person. How is this always severe? But I think it really was, PTSD that I didn't recognize. And so I had talked to Kevin that day. We kind of debriefed over my call, and he gave me some advice and some resources. And I had reached back out and I said, out of anything that I've ever tried, talking to you really, really helped me the most, because I didn't feel like I was alone and I felt like you understood. I don't know if anybody had been to a counselor that wasn't like based in healthcare or trauma informed, but you can kind of freak out a general
Absolutely.
counselor
Absolutely.
to where you like tell your story, and those memes where it's like that wet dog like staring down at the floor with huge eyes. That's kind of how
Yeah.
every
Oh,
counselor
yeah.
that I
Yeah.
ever seen looked like. I'm like, damn, I need to help them out. I mess them up over here
Yeah.
passively.
Yeah.
But after we talked about it and you're like, hey, you shared your experience with me, I got to thinking. I knew Kevin had a background in radio. And I said, hey, what do you think about starting a podcast about mental health? And he's like, I don't even know where we'd get started. And the next thing I know, I'm getting pictures from Amazon and he's ordering microphones and
Well, let me
headphones and everything.
hold on now. I'm the kind of person that I will be scared of something or be hesitant to do something until somebody gives me enough of a nudge, and then I'll jump off the cliff myself. And that's what you did for me. You gave me the nudge, and once somebody said, "Hey, this is a good idea," I was like, "All right, here we go." And off the cliff I went. My wife was not excited about our Amazon bill, but here we are now, and it seems to be going pretty well.
I'm
Yeah.
excited to be here, and I am happy that we have created this space, and Kevin and I have talked about it several times. Our goal is to just lend space, save space for you, because I'm sure there's other people besides me that's had the experience. I've cried in my car multiple times because I don't want my family to see me in that state of mind. I don't want my children to see me in that state of mind. I don't want my friends to see me in that state of mind, or my coworkers. So we all kind of tend to hide out and go through this grief alone, and it gets lonely there. There's been several times I've been in my car at the gym bawling my eyes out, almost wishing somebody would knock on my window and say, "Hey girl, you need a hug." I would have probably opened my door and took him up on it, because it's just
Yeah.
lonely
Yeah, it
sometimes
is.
to do this by yourself. It's exhausting. And some days when that trauma comes, it feels like it's never going to end. And we're happy to be here, and we're excited to hear other stories and offer different perspectives, and help each other out, but mostly just having a safe space for us and people like us to show love and support to one another, because in one way or another we do understand one another, and we're the best people to understand each other without judgment.
And I think the overshadowing theme here is that no matter what you do, whether you're a fireman, a doctor, a police officer, EMT paramedic, nurse, respiratory therapist, dispatcher, whatever your title is, you're dealing with something. Whether you'll admit it or not, we're all dealing with something. Everybody on the planet is dealing with something. I tell my daughter constantly that when people are mean to her or she gets triggered by something, I'll tell her people are all fighting an invisible battle that you can't see, that you know nothing about. So sometimes people's reaction and the way that we do things are directly linked to that. And I think that's what Kim and I came to the conclusion of once we really started past just the idea and me jumping off the cliff, past just those conversations. We started talking about how long we have suffered in this silence. And that's kind of where the name was born. We fight this silent war within all the time. When we have a bad call, when we have a bad day, when we have family issues, when we have childhood trauma, we constantly carry these things around with us, and we fight this silent war that nobody knows about. This is the place we want to bring to you and let people know about it. You're going to hear from guests from every walk of life, whether it's doctors, whether it's psychiatrists, whether it's life coaches, whether it's fellow responders like you, like me, like Kim. It's going to be such a fantastic journey that we're on. We want you to come with us. But the main thing we want you to take away from this is you have a place where we're going to tell you that seeking help is okay, and that sometimes seeking help in other forms is okay. It doesn't always have to be a counselor. It doesn't always have to be a psychiatrist or a psychologist. It can be your peers. That can be extremely comforting for a lot of people, as Kim said. For me, it's a therapist. For Kim, it's her peers like me. For other people, it's something different. But what we want to portray on this podcast is not just that those things are okay, but to stay away from the things that are not okay. You're going to hear conversations about addiction. You're going to hear conversations about depression. You're going to hear some heavy, heavy content moving forward. And that's okay. We want to normalize and make it regular for us to talk about these feelings and these things and the way that we're triggered and the way that we respond, both good and bad, because we can't have good responses from this and we can't have very negative responses from this. But the real key factor that I want you guys to really hone in on, if you hear nothing else we say throughout the whole show, you are not alone. And we are here to dive deeper into anything you guys want to dive into.
Mental health isn't a one size fits all, and I've recognized that within
That's right.
myself. There was many times that I've tried different coping mechanisms to help my own mental health, and nothing ever really fit great, because like me, I work two jobs. Anybody that works fire service and EMS, They could work 3 24s plus a week, depending on the amount of jobs that they're working. And this is something convenient for everybody. You don't have to dress up. You don't have to put on makeup. You don't have to get in your car. It's not going to cost you gas. Just tune in and listen, and you're going to have somebody here to listen and hear you and understand you. And anybody that wants to come talk, share their story, share anything, tips that's helped you cope, give us a shout. We'd love to have you and see you, talk to you anywhere in the country, anywhere in the world. We have ways.
Absolutely. Every week when we end our episode, we're going to end it just like this. I'm going to say, thank you for listening to A Silent War Within. We'll thank our guests. We'll be very gracious to them. But at the very end of the show, Kim's got something she's going to say every single show. It'll be consistent, and I absolutely love the way it ends the show. So, Kim, since this is the end of the show, it's your time to shine.
Be safe, take care of your mind, and we'll talk soon.
Bye-bye, everybody. You've been listening to A Silent War Within. If this episode resonated, please subscribe, leave a review, and share with someone who needs to hear it. Remember, you're not alone, and your well-being matters. It's time to end this silent war.